Imagine being the only one left in the dark, trapped in a silence so thick it feels like you are suffocating. Imagine walking the dusty streets of Jerusalem, feeling the cold wind of grief cutting through your linen clothes. For 3 years, you surrendered your entire life. You slept on the hard, cold ground under the open sky of Galilee, sharing the relentless heat and the biting night chill. You walked those dusty roads, surviving on barley bread and the occasional olive. And then, in one violent Roman execution, it all collapsed. The man you followed was dead. This is the reality of Thomas. History often diminishes him, reducing his complex humanity to a single, unfair title, the doubter. But before the doubt, there was a man of profound, systematic questions. He was the one who demanded solid evidence before accepting anything as absolute truth. When the other disciples huddled together in a locked room in Jerusalem, paralyzed by the suffocating fear of the religious leaders and the Roman soldiers, Thomas was not with them. Where was he? Perhaps wandering alone, trying to process a trauma that had just shattered his reality. The death of Jesus was not simply the loss of a revered master. It was the brutal, agonizing collapse of an entire universe of meaning. When he finally returns to his friends, they are ecstatic, declaring they have seen the resurrected Lord. But Thomas looks at their faces and feels the sharp, agonizing sting of exclusion. If Jesus was truly alive, why was Thomas left out? He draws a line in the dirt, a desperate condition born from a shattered heart. He formulates a clear, radical demand. Unless he sees the deep marks of the iron nails in his hands, and places his own finger into those wounds, and thrusts his hand into the pierced side, he will not believe. It was not mere skepticism. It was a visceral cry to touch the divine blood. Imagine enduring 8 agonizing days trapped in the echo of your own ultimatum. 8 days of suffocating tension in a cramped, sun-baked room in Jerusalem. The air is thick with the smell of stale bread and unwashed bodies, heavy with the terrifying whisper of Roman speculators, the executioners, patrolling the cobblestone streets outside. For the others, those 8 days were a time of euphoric, whispered celebration. But for Thomas, it was a psychological purgatory. Every time a floorboard creaked, every time a shadow passed beneath the locked heavy wooden door, his heart pounded against his ribs. Was it the temple guard coming to finish what they started at Golgotha? Or was it the impossible? The Gospel of John gives him a specific title, Didymos, the Greek translation of his Aramaic name, Theoma. It means the twin. History never explicitly names his biological sibling, leaving a haunting theological gap. Early church fathers often suggested that Thomas is the twin of every human being who wrestles with the agonizing silence of God. He mirrors our deepest, most visceral need for tangible proof in a world defined by profound suffering. He wasn't an arrogant cynic. He was a man bleeding from the inside out, terrified of trusting a hallucination, terrified of having his shattered heart broken a second time. The trauma of seeing the brutal Roman crucifixion machine, the scourging, the nails, the asphyxiation, was burned into his retinas. He knew what a corpse looked like. He knew the finality of a spear thrust into the pericardium. And then, the 8th day arrives. The doors are still barred. The heavy iron locks are securely fastened. No one has entered. No one has left. Suddenly, the atmospheric pressure in the room shifts. The temperature drops. A figure materializes in the center of the room, bypassing wood and stone as if the physical laws of the universe no longer apply. The chatter ceases. Silence, absolute and heavy, swallows the room. and the figure turns his gaze directly, exclusively, toward the twin. Imagine the sound of your own breathing suddenly becoming the loudest noise in a crowded room. Jesus does not look at Peter, who had so publicly denied him. He does not look at John. He walks slowly, deliberately, directly toward Thomas. And then he does something entirely unexpected. He does not deliver a harsh lecture on the virtues of blind faith. He does not humiliate Thomas for his demanding ultimatum. Instead, he offers exactly what the traumatized mind required to heal. He extends his rough, scarred hands. "Put your finger here," Jesus says. The original Greek text uses a very specific, almost aggressive verb for Thomas's previous demand, ballo. It means to thrust, to plunge. Jesus is not offering a delicate, symbolic touch. He is inviting Thomas into the visceral, jagged reality of his execution. He pulls back his tunic to reveal the deep, fatal strike of the Roman pilum, the heavy spear that had pierced his pericardium just days before. Think about the profound theological magnitude of this detail. Why did the resurrected Jesus, possessing a glorified body capable of passing through solid wood and stone, choose to keep his scars? Every other imperfection of human frailty was gone, but the fatal wounds remained. He kept them because those scars were the eternal receipt of the transaction made on Golgotha. They were the undeniable, physical proof that divine love had absorbed the ultimate violence of the world. We often talk about doubting Thomas, but popular history misses the point entirely. Thomas was the only apostle who dared to demand a tactile, forensic examination of the resurrection. And in doing so, he gave the early church its greatest empirical defense. He touched the divine blood, immortalized in the flesh. And in that terrifying fraction of a second, his intellectual resistance completely shattered. He fell to his knees on the dusty floorboards, looked at the mutilated, living hands, and uttered the highest declaration of Christology in the entire New Testament: "My Lord and my God." Imagine walking through your own life carrying a grief that no one else seems to understand. You sit in crowded rooms, surrounded by people who speak of hope, victory, and relentless positivity, while inside, you are silently suffocating under the weight of unanswered questions. This is where the story of Thomas stops being an ancient historical artifact and bleeds directly into our everyday reality. We live in a world that constantly demands a polished, unwavering certainty. We are often taught that faith means closing our eyes to the brutal, jagged edges of human suffering. But Thomas shatters that toxic illusion entirely. He is the patron saint of the brokenhearted, the anxious, and the deeply traumatized. Think about your own darkest moments. The terrifying medical diagnosis, the sudden betrayal, the agonizing loss of someone you loved. In those moments of crushing pressure, cheap platitudes do not work. You do not need a philosophical lecture. You need to know that the divine understands the physical texture of your pain. Thomas teaches us that heaven does not demand a pristine, unquestioning mind. It accepts the raw, messy, desperate demand for tangible reality. When you look at the interactions in your daily routine, how often do you hide your deepest doubts because you fear being judged by your peers? Thomas risked total alienation from his only remaining friends because he refused to fake a joy he did not possess. He demanded absolute authenticity. And the most beautiful, revolutionary truth of this account is the response. Christ did not arrive with a sword of judgment for the doubter. He arrived with an open, wounded hand. He met Thomas exactly where his trauma lived. In your everyday life, this means your profound doubts, your late-night anxieties, and your desperate demands for proof do not disqualify you from divine love. They are, in fact, the very intersection where grace becomes real. Your scars, your lingering questions are not a sign of spiritual failure. They are the exact places where you are invited to touch a love that survived death. Imagine carrying that single, shattering memory with you to the very end of your life. The physical sensation of the scarred, divine flesh never leaving your mind. Thomas, the man history unfairly labeled as the skeptic, did not stay in the comfortable familiarity of Jerusalem. The ancient traditions, supported by texts like the Acts of Thomas and the enduring legacy of the St. Thomas Christians, tell us he traveled further than any other apostle. He crossed hostile empires, vast deserts, and perilous oceans, finally arriving in the vibrant, overwhelming reality of first-century India. Imagine the heavy monsoon rains of the Malabar coast, the thick scent of cardamom and burning incense, the suffocating tropical heat. There, surrounded by a completely foreign culture, Thomas spent decades boldly preaching the exact thing he once adamantly refused to believe. He was no longer paralyzed by grief. He was propelled by an absolute undeniable certainty. He had touched the truth, and that truth demanded to be shared to the very ends of the earth. The historical accounts of his martyrdom are as brutal as they are deeply poetic. On a small hill in Mylapore, near modern-day Chennai, the religious authorities finally caught up with him. As he was kneeling in prayer, assassins surrounded him. And then comes the ultimate, striking parallel. Thomas was violently pierced by a spear. The same Roman weapon that had ruptured his master's heart in Jerusalem was the exact instrument that ended his own life in India. But as the cold iron struck him, Thomas did not despair. He knew exactly whose scarred hands were waiting to welcome him on the other side of that violent strike. The apostle of doubt died as the ultimate martyr of certainty. His legacy is not a warning against asking questions. It is a profound testament to where honest questions can lead you. What is your biggest doubt right now? What is the question you have been afraid to ask? Tell me your doubt in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if this story changed how you see Thomas, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next deep dive into history.